You know what? I always thought it was going to come crashing down. I thought it was going to come crashing down 15 years ago, but the morphs just kept coming and it just kept getting crazier and crazier. And the crazier it got, the more I thought to myself, I don't want to be any part of that. My understanding of the Dominican Reds is there's a very small locality high in the mountains, elevation, which is very close to the border of Dominican Republic and Haiti, and that's where all of the reds come from. The Sanzinia, the babies are born big and they eat right away. The Dominicans, babies are born tiny and they're a major pain to get going.
In this episode of the podcast, we discuss some species that are, to quote my guest, left of center. At this point, it's sort of a tired cliche to say that there are ball pythons everywhere in our hobby, and yes, that are true, but fortunately, there are people who are working with species that are outside of the box, and if you're somebody who actually wants to keep snakes, but when you look up the common snakes that are available, some ball pythons and cord snakes, it doesn't really pique your interest, then this episode is for you. Today, I'm speaking with Chad Steffen of Golden Coast Exotics. Chad is a longtime reptile keeper and breeder out of Southern California, and we discuss a few of the species that he's currently working with these are not obscure, rare species that you'll absolutely never see. They're species that are rare enough where you don't see them all the time, but are absolutely reasonable for you to get your hands on at some point if they do seem like something you'd want to keep. A few of the species Chad walks us through today are the Eastern Indigo, Sanzinia, which is the Madagascar tree boa, the Dominican Red Mountain Boa, which is one of the most beautiful species of snakes I've probably ever seen, a royal snake, which is a Middle Eastern colubrid, which is something that I've actually never seen before, but again, some fascinating facts about that species as well. If you are somebody who is looking for something, to quote Chad, left of center, then you absolutely want to dig into this episode. Even if one of the species we talk about today isn't something that piques your interest, I hope that it allows you to realize that there's more out there than just sort of the basic stuff that you would normally see. You're just going to have to do a little bit of digging, and Chad is a great resource if you're looking for more information on that. Let's jump into this episode. Enjoy. I think it goes without saying that Zoo Med Laboratories is an absolute keystone brand when it comes to herpeticulture. They have been a staple in reptile lighting, heating, food, decor, and enclosures. And one of the coolest parts about Zoo Med is they have a facility with over 1,500 animals, which means they're actually working with animals on a daily basis, developing products that are important to you and I. Later on in this episode, we're going to quickly discuss a Zoo Med product that is specifically designed for tortoises. Cool. Well, Chad, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to it. I've been following you on Instagram for a long time, and one thing that I we'll get into in a little bit is just the animals that you work with are very sort of out, not necessarily out of the box, but definitely not your common species that we see in the hobby. So we'll talk about that because I definitely love to promote kind of the diversity in the species and whatnot. But as we were just before we were starting, you were texting someone to talk about indigos, and I know you had just recently had an indigo clutch. Yeah. I'd be curious to know, I think the indigos have a related story to how you got started into the reptile hobby, just based off of the post that you had made. Can you talk to a little bit about how you just became involved with reptiles in the first place?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we can go back to, I guess we can go back to the very beginning. I'll try to keep it brief. But I was always excited about reptiles, and just, since I was a very little kid, my mom would probably tell you that as like 2 or 3 years old, I was like, could barely walk, but I could climb up and pull the S Encyclopedia Britannica off the wall. I didn't even know my letters yet, but I knew what S was because it had the pictures of the snakes, and I would go pull that book down and just to look at the pictures of the snakes. So snakes have just always been something that have interested me for a long time. So yeah, as a kid growing up in Southern California, there were a lot of hills, especially at the time. Now it's mostly houses, but hills behind my house, and my house kind of backed up to that area, so we get a lot of snakes in the yard. I would hike through the hills, constantly it seemed, looking for snakes, rattlesnakes and king snakes and gophers and ringnecks and stuff. And still to this day I enjoy herping a lot. But I would always keep snakes as much as I could. I would often kill them on accident, of course, but I didn't know what I was doing. But yeah, every birthday was like, oh, can I please get this snake at the pet shop? We'd end up with a green snake or a ribbon snake or something. So yeah, I just started off like that, and it's been that way since I was a baby. And then when I was about 12 years old, I just by happenstance, there was a paper called The Recycler that went out, and it was like a paper, it was like a Craigslist basically, but it was a tangible copy called The Recycler, and it would have a list of rabbits and other pets was the one that I'd go buy a Recycler, and I'd look through rabbits and other pets, and anybody selling any reptiles would have an ad there. So there was one that had some type of snake that I thought I needed or whatever. And it turned out to be Chuck Elliott, who lived in the same town as I lived in. And my buddy Jeff Bartlett and I went over to his house. His mom took us over there, and it was just I don't know, my mind was just blown. He had a couple of rooms in his garage that were just, rack systems, and then also bigger, which at the time there wasn't like beautiful enclosures like you have in the background there. It was more like all handmade stuff, but bigger enclosures for all his indigos. And yeah, it was just like, wow, this is amazing. This is how you do it. This is my person. This is this is what I want. So we looked at whatever snakes, and I told Chuck right there, like, is there any way I could come work for you? Like, 12 years old. I'm like, I just want to come clean some snake poop, whatever. And he's like, sure, you can come over on Saturday and, see how it goes. So I went over there that Saturday and spent the whole day cleaning snake stuff and working with the animals, and just doing whatever he needed to be done. He had a whole mouse house in the back, so we'd do the mice, and so from there it just became my hobby, and it has been really ever since. There's been times in my life where I've had a lot of animals, and then times when I've not had a lot, but I've always had something, and it's just kind of evolved over the years from there. But Chuck was definitely a huge influence, and he was a big dry marking guy back in the day. He was one of the first guys, or maybe the first guy, to ever successfully produce the 6 subspecies at that time. This is like, I'm going to age myself, but this is like in like early 90s.
Okay.
So there was not, it's not like it is now. There were some people working with them, but not like it is today. And it was great. He had the Texas Easterns, and then he had, the Central American dry mark on as well. So it was really cool. It was a great experience. And he had lots of rosy boas, gray band kings, a lot of different cool colubrids from mostly North American colubrids. But he also got a group of mandarin rat snakes started. He's one of the first ones to bring in and successfully kind of get some mandarin rat snakes established here in the U.S. So a lot of the mandarin rat snakes that you see now, came from those original animals that he got established way back when.
Is like for those folks who don't know, and that's even me, I've seen his name before, but I feel like it's a name that people should know more about, and I feel like I don't know much about him. Was that full time for him at the time, or
no?
Oh, okay.
No, I really don't think anybody at that time did snakes full time as a job.
That wasn't a thing yet, really.
It wasn't a thing, certainly not from a breeder standpoint. I mean, there were pet shops and there were big time guys that, jobbers or whatever, that would buy a lot and sell to different, Kalzu was around then, Prehistoric Pets, or just different avenues like that. But as far as just being a full-time breeder, no, definitely not. He worked for the San Onofre nuclear power plant at the time. And no, it was just strictly a hobby, as it is for me too. I'm just a hobbyist. So he was heavily into all these animals, and he ended up getting sick. He had a hepatitis on. Chuck, if you're watching this, I want to disclose all your medical information. But he's alive and well today. But he had a significant blood issue from a transfusion that he got from actually being burned at the nuclear power plant. Anyway, long story short, he ended up selling off all his animals. He was very sick for a long time, and thank God he's alive and well today. He's made it through that, and he's his normal self. He actually lived just a few streets over until a couple years ago he moved to Idaho. But yeah, he's not in the hobby anymore at all.
He's not, okay.
No, not at all. I actually bought his group of the last animals that he had was that whole group of mandarin rat snakes, and that was probably in I don't even know, 2002 maybe.
Oh wow.
Those are the last animals that he had. So no, he got rid of all of his animals in the late 90s. And there are still some of his offspring out there, or offspring of offspring of offspring, and
sure.
still in hobbies around. But no, he has not been a part of the hobby since. And he would come over and look at my animals and be like, I've thought about getting back into some of this or getting into some of this, and he just hasn't. He's into his cars, and that's kind of his hobby now, is his old cars, fixing up old cars.
That's so interesting when you have somebody who was doing it on such a scale and had this deep fascination to be able to just move on. I wonder how much knowledge went with him. Do you think that were you, as someone who was able to work with him and be close with him, do you think you extracted a lot of information from him, or do you think he's gone to his car hobby and he has things in his head that we'll never be able to replicate because of the experience he had?
No, I mean, I think that the knowledge that he possesses has been surpassed now, honestly. I mean, he has the old school knowledge that, these people, or myself included, I guess, like sometimes we feel like we're flying, right? Because we produced this animal, and it hasn't been produced a lot. We feel like we're flying, but really we're just standing on the shoulders of giants that came before us, So I know more than Chuck did, right? Now I do. But I would have never gained that knowledge without the people before me getting the basis of that I could build on.
Sure.
And so people today, we all keep our animals better than we did back then. At least I hope. I certainly do. Than Chuck did at the time, I think. But we would have never got here without the stepping stones of the people before us. So, yeah, is that knowledge disappearing with him? I don't think so. No, I think that he had a lot to learn then, and he learned it the hard way. And I was able to, and we all really have been able to build on the mistakes made by those that came before us.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as a kid, as a 12-year-old, did you continue to work with him on a pretty regular basis?
Yeah, I worked with him every weekend.
Oh, wow.
I was. We became super close. No, he's still a great friend, and so I worked with him every weekend. I would do shows with him, travel to do shows. We would do some herping trips out in the desert looking for rosy boas or just whatever. I was happy to find any reptile anytime. But rosy boas were really big at the time, so we spent a lot of time herping for rosy boas. And no, that continued on. I actually ended up moving back east after I turned 14. So there were 2 solid years that I worked for him. Then I moved to Kentucky from California, but I would come back and stay with my dad for the summers. It was kind of complicated, but anyway, long story short, Chuck and I remained close and still remain close to this day. But I would actually come back. When I would come back from Kentucky to visit, Chuck would have all these baby snakes, and I would take them in socks in my pockets and take them back on a plane to Kentucky. So I was like smuggling snakes from California to Kentucky, just milk snakes and king snakes, whatever I could fit. I would put them in socks, and all my pockets would be full of snakes and socks. And then I would walk through the metal detector and then put them in my backpack, take them back to Kentucky and sell them.
Oh, that's awesome. And so
it was a different time.
Oh, yeah, definitely a different time. Yeah, I don't recommend anyone does that now, but
No, you will not. You will not make it through through the X-ray machine.
Yeah.
These days, but at the time, shipping reptiles was such a deal back then. It wasn't like FedEx could just guarantee. I mean, there were reptiles being shipped still, but it was a little different. It was a little different time for sure.
Yeah. And then going back to the indigo post that you had made, you had recently had this clutch. Is that the first clutch of indigos that you've had?
Yeah. I never had an indigo until maybe, I think I got my female from Mike McKinnon maybe 4 years ago, and I had worked with countless other things, but the indigos always had a special place in my heart because I'd worked with them so much with Chuck. But I didn't want to commit that much space to them. I know they're messy-ish. Actually, not as messy as I was fearing, but I had a lot of images in my head of indigo poop smeared all over the glass from working with Chuck when I was a kid. So, I stuck with a lot of the smaller colubrids, some other stuff, and I just never got any indigos. And then Mike had that clutch, and I said, you know what, it'd be really cool to have an indigo. I should have one. So I got that one, ended up getting a male, and then so those are the 2 Eastern Indigos that I have right now, and they produced this year for the first time, and everything went well. So I'm stoked.
Full circle.
I don't know. Yeah, Chuck was excited to see it, but I don't know how deep I'll get into dry marcon. But I recently got some Mexican indigos as well, the Rubidus, from a couple different people. I have a 1.2 group of those. They're still babies right now, but yeah, man, there's no denying that dry marcon are just awesome snakes, and if you've got the space and the time for them, they're pretty special.
Yeah,
so,
I think anybody I think one of the best ways I've heard them described was They are an intense snake. Somebody who had kept one, he kept some boas, and somehow he ended up with one Eastern Indigo, and he's like, that thing is so intense, but it's scary and fun to work with. Something that oddly unites reptile keepers is our incredible ability to procrastinate. I don't know what it is about this hobby, but it attracts people that have minds that move in a million different directions at once, and it can make you very, very inefficient. Now, lately, I've been doing something to help me with this productivity issue, and that is to use the mental performance shot from Magic Mind. Magic Mind is a tasty little drink that I add to my mid-morning routine to enhance my mood, motivation, and focus, and it has 12 ingredients that are not only 100% safe, but also scientifically proven to help your brain work more efficiently and effectively. Some of the ingredients include lion's mane and bacopa for mental performance, ashwagandha and turmeric for stress relief, and cordyceps and matcha for calm energy. So for me personally, I'm a very busy person. For example, today I'm up at 20 after 4 in the morning so I can head to the pool and coach for about 4 hours. And then I come home, and in between my coaching sessions, because I go back in the afternoon, I'm either doing swim club associated stuff or I'm doing podcast associated stuff. So I'm constantly being pulled between two very different worlds. And quite often that forces me to have a giant to-do list, which either makes me paralyzed and I don't do any of it, or I become manically productive, which makes me feel stressed and not good at all. When I take Magic Mind at about that mid-morning, kind of 10 o'clock after my first coaching session, I have a productive, calm energy that allows me to get through my daily tasks without feeling burnt out, exhausted, and stressed. You can buy a box of 15 or 30 bottles or sign up for a monthly subscription. And the incredible thing about Magic Mind is if you take it and you don't like it, they will give you a 100% refund, no questions asked, 100 days after the purchase of the product. That is how confident they are that you will love this. So if you're looking for a mental boost, if you're looking for calm, productive energy, make sure you check out magicmind.com/animals at home and receive up to 48% off on your first subscription purchase using the coupon code animalsathome20.
Yeah, no, that's accurate. That's accurate. They're intense. Their feeding response is intense, and they just kind of demand a respect, from you. So, no, they're great. I love them. And
for me, someone who has boas and pythons, and I have one colubrid, but one thing that always impresses me with something like an indigo is just the speed and how quickly they can move across the enclosure. So how do you set them up?
They cover ground like crazy.
Yeah.
I have mine in 4x3x2s, my adults anyway, and they do really well for me. I think probably more than any other snake that I have, they spend time out of the enclosure, especially my big male. He's really outgoing. I mean, oftentimes if I'm working in there, I'll just open the door to see what he wants to do, and he'll oftentimes just come out kind of at first when the door opens, he's like, am I going to get fed? And he's like ready to put something in his mouth. But if he just comes out, he doesn't smell any prey items, and he'll just come out and start cruising around. And I even let him go in the backyard sometimes. And I'm watching him, but he's fast when he wants to be, but for the most part, he's a really big male. So he just cruises through the backyard, smells the chickens and whatever. And I think it's important for that species to have a lot of time to cruise, more so than a ball python, for example. I don't work with ball pythons, but each species just has a different set of parameters and requirements and personality. You could call it that or whatever. But the indigos, for sure, if I'm going to take something out, spend time with an animal, they're confident, especially the big ones. They're really confident. I don't feel like I'm stressing them out by handling them. I think they get something out of it. Some of the other animals, are going to be a little bit more stressed in that situation or whatever. But yeah, the indigos love it, man. They get out, cruise around the backyard, and I try to give them as much time out of the enclosure as possible.
And they don't, I'm sure they don't have access to the chickens. Obviously, chickens are way too big for them to eat, but does that ever freak you out? Like, is there like a prey scent that they might pick up on?
So our chickens are just sort of free range in the backyard, so there's, I feel like the whole backyard smells like a chicken. Maybe not that bad. I mean, not for you and I, but no, I think it just kind of gives them something to look around for. And sometimes I'll take mice and make him like take a very long pair of tongs and take a dead mouse and sort of make him chase it around, if you will, like through the backyard to give him some exercise. And this male actually came to me. He was actually gifted to me by someone who had him, and she just couldn't take care of him anymore. He got too big, and it was just a little bit more snake than she could handle. When I got him, he was very overweight, like ridiculous. And so it really took me some time. I'm like, all right, this guy needs to thin out. Like he's going to die, right? I mean,
Yeah.
fat reptiles will die 100% of the time, much sooner than a healthy weighted one. So I spent a lot of time with him in the backyard, just making him go from basically one side to the other, chasing a mouse. I'd feed him very small prey items once or twice a week to make sure the metabolism's still going and all that, but to get him some exercise. So we really spent a lot of time in the backyard like that. And no, he never tried to eat a chicken or anything. The chickens are huge.
Yeah.
But yeah, our backyard's full of stuff. We got bunnies and chickens and dogs and tortoises and all sorts of stuff. So lots of what I meant by that was there's a lot of smells for him to go investigate back there.
Yeah. There's lots of sensory input for him.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'd seen a picture. I think it was with the chickens or the tortoises. There was bearded dragon back there as well. Is that a free range bearded dragon, or not a free range, but you have an outdoor enclosure for them? Or
Yeah, I have an outdoor enclosure.
Okay.
I have 2 bearded dragons. One of them is 20 years old, and one of them is about 12 years old.
Wow.
They both came to me as just people that had them, that were just. My kid got this and didn't. Actually, the male came from that situation. The female actually came to me almost 20 years ago. Someone found it in their backyard as an adult. Someone called me up like, "Hey, you want a lizard? It's in my backyard." I'm like, "No, just let it be a lizard." And they're like, "No, I don't think it's from around here. It's really, really big." I'm like, "Okay." So I got to look at the thing. I'm like, "What the heck? This is a bearded dragon. These obviously don't live around here. Somebody probably either let it go because they didn't want it anymore, or who knows what happened." But anyway, yeah, that's Sparky, and I've had her for almost 20 years.
And is it just an outdoor
so they live
enclosure?
in the back. They actually. Yes, but I bring them in when it cools down, like winter time, and they have a big heat mat. They actually cohab with my rhino iguana in a big outdoor enclosure, and there's like a cave with a heat mat, so they go down in there at night. And right now it's still pretty nice during the day. It's in the 80s, 80 and 85 sometimes in the day, so they come out, bask, eat whatever, and then at night they go down into their cave. But it's going to start cooling down here. When the nights get into the 50s, low 50s, I'll start bringing everybody in at night.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's
but
cool.
They do well out there. Like I said, she's almost 20 years old, so
it's hard to beat natural sunshine.
Yeah, the natural sunshine and just the nighttime temperatures too. I don't know. I feel like with bearded dragons, especially, people are overfeeding them and then they can handle that nighttime drop too, and I feel like it's probably good for them. Overall, for their general health, they can handle that nighttime drop and then being hot again in the day. Yeah,
absolutely. Sure. Yeah, just keeping them warm all the time and overfeeding them is just a recipe. Mm-hmm. Just burn them out for sure.
Yeah, for sure. No, I have one of my best buddies is a bearded dragon guy, and he produces quite a bit. He's like, I cannot believe how old she is. I'm like, yeah, you see, she's kind of skinny. Like I intentionally do not overfeed her. She's on this, not skinny, but she's what if you found a bearded dragon in the wild, this is how they would probably look. Not like many that you see, people carrying around or at shows or whatever, where they're clearly overfed. Like if this animal lives more than 6 or 7 years, it's going to be a miracle. He's got, feeding the thing all day long. Just because they will eat doesn't mean they should. And it's the same with the indigo, the big male indigo that I have. The lady that had him is a great person, and she keeps quite a few reptiles and she keeps them well. But in this case, she loved that indigo so much that it was just like, well, he's really hungry, like feed him again. It's like, I think I said in one post, it was like grandma, feeding her grandkids like more cookies. Yeah. It's like, oh, but they're so happy when they eat that ice cream and cookie, and
he'll just keep eating.
And the indigos, of course, just like bearded dragons, they'll just eat until they're fat. That's just, and that's unhealthy for reptiles for sure. You got to watch their weight. Can't feed them too much. They die young.
So I'm curious about your collection over the years. You've said it's kind of expanded and contracted over time, and now you're left with a fairly unique collection. We'll talk about kind of what you have. You've already mentioned a few, but I'm curious if at this point in time, is there something that draws you to specific things, or do you have some sort of rules that you follow when you choose a species to work with, or do you just go with the things that you think you'd like?
I think anything that interests me, I definitely like things that are left to center. I've never had any interest in ball pythons or even boas.
Have you ever worked with ball pythons?
So I had a group of them that were gifted to me many years ago, and I actually had a pair that was gifted to me, and then a group of them that were gifted to me a couple years later. I would kind of sell them, or I had, some friends that were like, "Oh, my son wants a snake," and it's like, you know what? I got this adult ball python. It's great. Here you go. So I did produce a few clutches of different things, just with those groups that were given to me. I've just kind of, if somebody wanted one, I was almost giving it away, or I eventually was like, you know what? I'm just done. I think the most adult ball pythons I've ever had was maybe 10 or 12,
Mm.
and I wasn't actively really trying to produce a whole lot of them. So yeah, ball pythons have just never really interested me. I like a little bit like Noah's Ark, man. I got like a pair or two of a lot of different things. Um, I like stuff that's left to center, stuff that you don't see a lot of. Obviously, something that's has either an interesting natural history to it or an interesting look to it. The Dominicans and the Atriceps, and the other kind of left to center stuff that I work with. So yeah, I mean, it's something that interests me for whatever reason. I'm just like, what, I'd like to have a pair or two of those. And then,
Yeah.
in many cases, I've been able to successfully produce them, and I'm stoked. So with the Dominicans, it started with just two pairs, and then they're so cool. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And then I had a litter, and it was like, wow, this one baby is really crazy looking. I got to keep this one. And then, of course, you know, as time goes on, it's like, okay, how many holdbacks do you really need? So I've let some of those go. I have a relatively small group. I think I have maybe six adults total on the Dominicans, and then Sanzinia too. Sanzinia are something that Chuck also had way back in the day. He had Sanzinia then, and I loved them then. And yeah, they're one of my favorites for sure. Just personality wise, they're great. They're super easy to take care of, and they just have a killer look to them. I love their look. Big giant head. They look like a Bushmaster-ish. I mean, they look
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they should be a venomous animal, and they got the best personalities of any of the tree boas for sure that I've worked with anyway. So I
Yeah,
love
they
the
are.
Sanzinia.
I've always loved the way they look, and I was trying to remember as I was kind of looking at photos of yours. I remember talking to someone that said they didn't like Sanzinia. They're like, I don't like the way they look. Something's weird about them. Maybe it was the head shape. I forget because they do have kind of a
Mhm.
peculiar head shape. But
Oh, for
I
sure. And the
think
heat
they're
pits are real interesting too.
yeah, they're so beautiful. I mean, the pattern. So can you talk a little bit about them? There's two, as far as I understand, two species, or two, are they? No, they're not
Hmm.
subspecies, right? They're two separate species. And so
They
maybe you
are
could
now,
kind of
yeah.
walk through those, and do you work with both, and what's the difference?
Yeah, so at one time they were described just as Sanzinia madagascariensis, and there was a couple different phenotypical differences, Easterns and Westerns, or greens and mandarins. They have different things, but it was at one time it was just described as one species, and then it was a subspecies, and now it's a full species. So there's Sanzinia madagascariensis, which would be like an eastern or a green phase. I actually made a YouTube video on this, but if you look at Madagascar, like on Google Earth, you'll see that the eastern side of the island is much more lush. It's where all the rainfall is happening. The western side of the island is much drier. So there is actually somewhat of a natural boundary in the middle, with the highlands being in the middle, where you've got two separate species. Is basically what it comes down to. Yeah. So you've got easterns and westerns. Westerns are Sanzinia volantani, and the easterns are Sanzinia madagascariensis, which would be the green phase,
Mm.
and the volantani are the westerns or mandarin phase.
So
Um,
they're more like an orangey kind of color.
yeah, they're born with some reddish sometimes, a lot of yellow. As they get older, they sort of fade out to either like a brownish with the yellow or a gray. I've got a couple that are like really like a gray, almost like xanthic looking a little bit.
Mm.
Um, and the Easterns, some will be very green as adults. They're gorgeous, unbelievable. They'll be very green with the white highlights. So they're very attractive. The Easterns are very attractive. Westerns are not as attractive as adults. As babies, I think they look great. As they grow up, that some of that color does fade out for sure. But by the time they get big, you love them so much that it doesn't matter what they look like, honestly,
Yeah,
for
and
me
their
anyway.
pattern's still there. Like the pattern is still it's kind of like a Dumer's boa, right? It's so cryptic looking and interesting to look at.
Yeah, the pattern on some of the adults will stay fairly vibrant and keep some of the yellow, and other adults will fade out. Not they're not monochrome. The pattern is still there, but it's not as vibrant as it is
Mm.
um, when they're babies. When they're babies, the pattern's unreal. I don't work with Easterns. I work with Westerns only. Um, yeah, Easterns have proven to be difficult over the years. Obviously, nothing's coming out of Madagascar, or no Sanzinia have been imported into this country for a long time. It seemed like Westerns just did better for people over the years. There were a lot of babies produced from different lineage. The Easterns just a little tougher to reproduce. Sanzinia in general are pretty tough. If it's every other year, you're lucky. Sometimes it's every third year, and even then, it's not consistent. That's the thing with Sanzinia. It's very sporadic, you could say. I've been lucky enough to produce several litters here, but it's not something that you'd ever rely on per se. It's like maybe I'll get a litter this year. Everything looks right. They've been hooking up every time I put them together, the things lock up, but that just doesn't is not guaranteed with Sanzinia. They're pretty tough to get to reproduce. The Easterns seem to be even tougher. I'm not sure exactly why that is. It does seem like there's a diminished green gene pool with the Easterns. I hear a lot about very small litters, 2, 3 animals and one lived, or maybe 5 animals and 2 lived, and I know that wasn't always the case back in the early days of heavy numbers of imports coming in. There were very large Easterns giving litters, 20 animals. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I like to think that there's a diverse enough gene pool here for Easterns that we can, kind of continue on. I'm fairly confident that there is with Westerns because a lot of them were brought in, a lot of them lived, and a lot of them produced. Um, when I say a lot, I don't mean like ball python numbers. I just mean like
Yeah, yeah.
Tanzania numbers, relatively speaking. So yeah,
Can you be
someday I
confident
may.
that that you're looking at an Eastern versus a Western, or like because I'm sure there was some mixing up of the two species at some point.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, that's definitely possible. If you're looking at a very nice Eastern, absolutely. You can tell the difference, especially once they get into subadulthood. As babies, they look very similar. Um, there are some not so nice looking Easterns that look very much like a Western, maybe with a little bit of a green, olive green tinge to it, but not the emerald green like you see with some really nice ones. So yeah, there's a fair amount of diversity, and if you follow the lineage way back, is it possibly possible that an Eastern and a Western were put together and produced a litter of somewhere in between? Of course, that's definitely a possibility.
Mm.
Um, you never really know, I guess. In that situation, I'm fairly confident that all mine are Westerns. They don't really show any of that emerald green at all, or even olive green. So
Now,
I don't know. I would love to go to Madagascar someday
oh
and
yeah,
spend 2 months and travel all around, and really look at difference, because I notice so much difference between even just a litter that I get of 14 babies or something. There's a ton of variation within those 14 babies. Some are very, very dark, um, and others will be really red with a lot of yellow highlight. So, you know, I know that once you start to get up into the highlands, there's some really dark animals have been documented. But I've had really dark animals in some of my litters too, and they're right, with their siblings that have a lot of yellow. So yeah, it's just the natural variation, and it's hard to say for certain what is what.
well, that's probably part of what makes them so fun and fascinating to work with. Is A, it's kind of a mystery when you get the litter, and then B, if you're
Hmm.
having to wait like another 2 or 3 years to get another iteration of that
Hmm.
litter, then your
Yeah,
data is really far. It's taking a long time to kind of collect to figure out to piece the species together, basically.
sure. Yeah, I have a couple that I held back had a litter in 2019, 2021, and 2023, and I have a couple really high yellow animals that I've held back to. But like you said, it just takes so much time. It's not like some of the faster maturing snakes like ball python, for example. You kind of can guarantee that within 3 years or 4 years, you should be able to get some babies, sometimes even less than that. But with Sanzinia, I really feel like it's like a 5 to 6 year minimum that I won't even attempt to breed a female until at least 5 or 6 years. The
Yeah.
males can, you can get away with it much younger, but yeah, it takes time. They're a slow growing animal for sure, and I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges is with them. And if we're going to try to line breed something, I mean, you're looking at 25 years to get, a couple
Yeah.
different, just to prove something out, it takes time. So it's a long game, which is fine with me.
Something that we've talked on the podcast a lot is the ethics of keeping tortoises. I think one of the issues many people have with tortoises is they do not nail the diet, which means the animal becomes malnourished because they overfeed fruits and vegetables, things that would be good for you and I, but not for the tortoise. Fortunately, Zoo Med's grassland tortoise food solves that issue, and it now comes in a crumble version, which is perfect for juveniles and small species of tortoise. This food was formulated for all stages of life by a PhD nutritionist to replicate the natural diet of grassland tortoises, which is high in fiber and low in protein. The product contains coarsely ground timothy, miscanthus, and alfalfa grasses to provide important long stem fiber. It is made with enticing fresh endive, escarole, and dandelion greens, and it also contains a source of live and viable naturally occurring organisms. These probiotics help maintain digestive health, which is crucial for hind-gut fermenters like tortoises. Zoo Med's grassland tortoise food crumbles is perfect for all grassland tortoise species. For more information on this or any other Zoo Med product, make sure you head to zoomed.com or check out the link in the show notes or the YouTube description. But you'd also mentioned just their personality and the way that, just the essence of the animal is something that you really enjoy. Can you kind of walk us through how large they get as an adult, and then what are they fairly tame? Kind of
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
They
let us
really
know.
are. By nature, they're just placid. Sometimes the babies, like little babies, if you put your finger in front of their face, they'll get irritated and strike at you. But honestly, that's not normally the case. And I feel like with tree boas, like I've had Amazon tree boas and some other stuff over the years, they've got that kind of just like, I'm gonna frickin' get you the second you touch me, or they're kind of jumpy, And Sanzinia are not like that. They still have very good vision and they see everything, but they just don't have that knee-jerk reaction to bite or even jump or race around or get aggravated. They're just really mellow by nature, apparently, because whether you handle one a lot or not, they have the kind of the same personality around you, which is just kind of a low stress, just chill animal. And they'll still come out, perch. They don't perch like a green tree python or an emerald broa where they really look beautiful. They're sort of more of a drape situation. So I have like several branches kind of layered on top of itself so they can kind of support their body weight. I find that the smaller animals tend to perch a lot more than the bigger ones, even when given the opportunity. Our biggest animals are pretty big, 6 feet long, maybe.
Okay.
I think maybe 7,500 grams, maybe 8,000 grams, something like that. So they're big. They're big animals, especially the females will get pretty large, pretty girthy. And at that point, they will come up and perch sometimes, but they do spend a lot of time just on the ground, just hanging out, And the babies, I find, are up cruising and perching more often.
Mm. Well, they are a really cool species. And I feel like that, one of the things that I think is interesting, as I had mentioned with the stuff that you're working with, is it does feel like we need more people like you to help bring diversity back to herpetoculture in general. I mean, there's so many fascinating animals that we could be working with that I think have slowly not disappeared, but just the number of people working with them is just so much smaller. And I'm sure there is somebody out there listening that description of that species checked like every box that they would want in a pet snake, and they just never really thought about it before because we just aren't exposed to as much as we used to be, I feel like.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. The Sanzinia, they basic temperature requirements, basic humidity requirements. They eat right out of the gate most of the time, every time you want to feed them, and they handle great. So yeah, no, they're awesome. Yeah. As far as diversity in the pet trade and what's available, everything sort of fell on the ball python market. When ball pythons started getting super popular it took over. And I think anybody who was going to shows in the early 2000s up to about, 3 years ago was probably like, man, every table is ball python table. So it sort of just took over in so many ways. And it's nice now. I've noticed definitely in the last 3 to 5 years, maybe, that there is a lot more diversity out there. There are a
Yeah.
lot of people working with just different stuff. And like you said, there's just so many great animals that are not represented. Um, but I feel like people are branching out. As this ball python market kind of continues to crash, you're going to see a lot of, hopefully, see people get into some other species, which is great because there's so many there's so many
Yeah.
other ones that are just not popular for whatever reason, or no one's even looked into keeping that as a captive, which not all. The thing with ball pythons is they're just natural. Their natural history lends themselves very well to be a captive snake, right? So, and not all snakes are meant to be kept in captivity by any stretch, but
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a lot more
Absolutely.
options out there than ball pythons for sure.
So how, because you would have been right in it when the ball python market was starting to kind of take off and explode. How
Mhm.
come that wasn't attractive to you to jump in on that?
You know what? I always thought it was going to come crashing down. I thought it was going to come crashing down 15 years ago. It was like, I remember with like the first, it was like the pastel. I was like, well, look at that pastel ball python. This guy made a super pastel. I was like, okay, well, they're kind of cool looking, but whatever. And then it was like, well, then you got this. You can breed this albino over here with a pastel. And then it was just there were so many different morphs, and I've never been. I do work with some morphs of milk snakes and stuff, but I've just never been a huge morph guy, and it just got so complicated to where you had to have so many animals to potentially produce this super of this. I don't know. It just never really appealed to me, honestly. I was more of a species guy. It's like I'd rather take a wild type of something and try to get the nicest one possible, than take a morph and try to do something crazy. And I don't know. And ball pythons just aren't that interesting as captives, really. I think
Yeah.
that's what it came down to for me, is that they would much rather be left alone, in I mean, I don't want to bash on any ball python people, because there's ball pythons have done a lot for this hobby, so I'm not gonna try to say that they haven't. But from a personality wise, I like a snake that interacts a little bit, that might enjoy its time out of the cage, not just be super stressed out all the time. Not that there's not some ball pythons that aren't outgoing, because I've had good outgoing ball pythons too over the years, but for the most part, they're a little on the boring side, basically,
Yeah.
in,
They're
in
not
my
going to
opinion.
cruise around your backyard like your indigo.
Yeah, for sure. You put it in your backyard, it's gonna be stressed out,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, they were just a little boring for me from a personality perspective, and there are some great looking ones. I mean, there's some amazing looking ball pythons out there. They really are. But I thought that 10 years ago it was just going to collapse to where every ball python was just going to be the same price, and that was that. And you're kind of starting to see that now a little bit, other than the really, really the guys who are deep, deep into it, and they're producing some stuff that looks pretty crazy. But I always thought that it was going to come crashing down from a morph perspective long before it did, but the morphs just kept coming, and it just kept getting crazier and crazier. And the crazier it got, the more I thought to myself, I don't want to be any part of that,
Yeah.
because you just eventually it's going to get to the point where you're going to have a lot of animals that are not um, being taken care of. I mean, that's what's happening right now. Exactly what I thought would happen 10 years ago is happening now, where you've got 40,000 ball pythons available on morph marker. What, I don't even know what the number is now. I haven't looked, but yeah, when people start treating their animals like it's a car part, that's just stuck in a drawer. Like, you can have somebody who's a hoarder, like somebody who's really into working on cars. They should do that for their living. But you can have a million car parts and put it in a drawer, and when you have that car that needs that part, great. But you can't start treating your animals like that. And not that there aren't great ball python keepers out there, but there's a lot of people that got really a lot of animals, and they
Yeah.
probably can't care for them in the way that they should be cared for. And there are people that are, but when you have 1,000 different possibilities of morphs, you got to keep 1,000 animals to get all those possibilities, or whatever. It becomes this kind of self-perpetuating hoarding situation with the ball pythons, because there's just so many different options where it's not that way with a single species. If you're looking for a species, okay, I produced an incredible looking mandarin rat snake. I'm going to keep this one because it's a really nice high yellow animal with great lines or whatever. I can keep that one.
Mm.
But with ball pythons, it's like, well, I produce this one that's going to be possible het for this and this, and I have this other one that's visual this and this, and I want to breed that together with this one over here. Next thing you know, you got somebody with 1,000 ball pythons, and you know,
Yeah, it's
I don't want to be
probably
any. I don't want any part of that.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
want any part of that. I've never wanted to be in it. Yeah, and now unfortunately, some animals are suffering because of that. At this
yeah,
point in time, right now, we're seeing that in real time, and
yeah,
that's sad.
absolutely. Yeah, and I can see the allure in it, and but I kind of see it the way you do as well. Where from an outsider's perspective, it does look like a bottomless endeavor that you feel like you're never going to get to the finish line of that. So I mean, like you said, they do make a great pet if you're somebody who's just getting your first snake and you want something that's very mellow and not going to
Sure.
be jumping around and high energy. That's another thing. But yeah, if the species behavior doesn't fit what you want to see in a pet, you shouldn't just get into it because it comes with different morphs. You're not going to enjoy the animal as much. So yeah, I think that was very well said. Well, let's jump into another species that you work with that I don't see a ton of, and that's the Dominican boas. That's kind of another species that was a bit confusing to me when I was just reading about them. Are the Dominican, there's several different species under that Chilibothrus genus, and are you just working with one, or are you working with several different ones?
Yeah, I'm just working with one. Yeah, it all used to be Epicrates, and then Chilibothrus came off of that to where it's all like the Caribbean boas, from Jamaican boas, Cuban boas, Dominican boas, from all these different islands, Ford's boas. And yeah, that nomenclature is still a little bit up in the air. I think it will probably change again over time. Yeah, I don't work with any of those other ones. I do like Jamaican boas a lot. I think they're gorgeous. They're a little bit snappy. All the ones I've seen have not been. They're kind of a high stress tree boa in a way relative to the Dominicans. The Dominicans are super mellow. I mean, they're in a way
Really?
like the Sanzinia. They're very easy to handle. The only issue I see with them I ever have is getting the babies to eat. That's a challenge.
Are they lizard
And
eaters
a
in
lot
the
of a lot of
wild?
that is, yeah, exactly. A lot of that's based on the fact that they're so non-aggressive. If you have a snappy little tree boa, you can kind of tease feed them and get them to bite something and then hopefully eat it. But the Dominican boas are just not that way. So yeah, they are lizard eaters in the wild for sure. So yeah, getting them to eat can be a challenge for sure on the babies. I end up usually ordering some brown anoles from Florida, and some will take a frozen thawed brown anole. Some will take, you'll have to start them out with live ones. Some will take a scented pinky. Some will take a scented pinky with cat food scenting or fish scenting, or a ground up frozen anole. It's definitely not a one size fits all. I mean, I don't know how many I've actually produced, but quite a few, like maybe 150 Dominican Reds over the years. Maybe not quite that many, but anyway, there's never been a one size fits all. It's really, you got to try this, and one will eat that, and 10 other ones won't, and you got to have a note card for every single animal, and really be like, okay, well, last week this one ate this way, presented this way, scented with this, and so I know I can do that. And of course, the end goal is to get them eating unscented frozen thawed rodents, right?
Right.
Which they will all get to there, but some of them are, you got to work the thing for a year to get it on there. Other ones, it's within a month or two.
And
So
once you get
that's
them
the
there, the
biggest challenge.
adults are pretty consistent.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, once they get going, it's not an issue.
Mhm.
They eat great. I try to feed my adults and subadults frozen quail, rats and mice, and they eat all three. No
Okay.
problem. No problem at all. It's the babies that are tough to get going. It's tough to get that first and second meal down. And once they get going, you can rely on it. But for sure, like I had a litter this year, and there's a lot of people that have been reaching out to me for the last year. Hey, we're gonna get another litter. We're gonna get another litter, and can I send you a deposit? I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not doing any of that until I for sure have them established on frozen thawed pinkies, because it's kind of bit me in the ass a little bit over the years, having an animal that's semi-established, and someone's like, okay, well, I'm fine. I'll work with it myself. I can, send it off. It won't eat anything for them. They got to send it back. I get it eating again, and then send it off, and then maybe the second time around I'll do fine. But for me, the well-being of the animal is the paramount thing. I want this animal to go wherever it's going and thrive. So I try to get them like super well established. Sometimes it takes, like I said, 6 months or a year before I'll let them go. And that's just what it takes. I guarantee you that if I sold them as babies, unestablished babies, almost every single one of them would die.
Yeah.
It just would not. It's not practical for someone who's not really used to working with finicky babies to get them started. So I just don't even entertain it until I really have them well established, and I know that animal's going to thrive.
Well, and they are. There's no wonder that you have people reaching out to you a lot, because they are beautiful species. And
For sure.
For those who are listening who aren't aware, they're sort of like almost like a bulky Amazon tree boa. Like they have a kind of that sort of feel. But the ones that you work with are very red. So is that a line of that species, the Dominican species?
Well, I've never been there, but I would love to go someday. My understanding of the Dominican Reds is there's a very small locality high in the mountains elevation, which is very close to the border of Dominican Republic and Haiti, which if you look at the island of Hispaniola, or whatever you want to call it, it's kind of divided in half between Haiti and Dominican Republic. So there's an elevation mountain range there in the middle, and that's where all of the Reds come from originally. There was a very large group brought in by Tom Crutchfield, Bob, I'm trying to remember the last name of it, Acatio or something like that. Anyway, they brought in a large group of them many years ago, and that's basically where almost all the Dominicans that are now Dominican Reds anyway being produced, they all came from that original group, or for the most part from that big group that they brought in way back when, and Tom Crutchfield was a big part of that.
Okay. Because when you Google Dominican boa, you get like a kind of a brown or green type, maybe like not a brilliant red one. So I wasn't sure if that was just line bred over years, or that's kind of how the original ones
it's not
look
line bred. They're naturally occurring in that locality. It's a naturally occurring morph, or I mean, it's not even a morph. It's a naturally occurring animal. They're not all as red as that, and obviously there's not a wall around that particular mountain range, so there's going to be snakes coming and going, and there's going to be a gradient on that. I've focused on trying to get the reddest ones possible. All of my adults are very nice reds. It's definitely a long game with them. They're not born looking like that. That's something that somebody who's interested in this species should know. Really look at the adults that produce the animal, not what the animal looks like right now. I mean, that's happened countless times over the years. They're like, well, you have any of those available? Yes, I do. Can I see some pictures? Yes, you can. Sure, here you go. They're like, well, yeah, but I want a really nice red one. It's like, okay, well, this animal's a year old, and it's not going to be red at this age, no matter what. It's a long game. It's a long game animal. It takes time to get that, and it'd be like the equivalent of saying, do you have any green tree pythons available? Yes. Here's the baby. Well, this one's yellow. I want a green one.
Yeah,
like, okay,
exactly.
No, they go through an autogenic color change, and they're going to get there. So
that probably makes it difficult to plan your holdbacks, though, if you're really trying to create a brilliant red group of animals. You
know what I've actually noticed? My holdbacks that I've kept, it's not been the red. When I'm looking at the pattern on the babies, it's not the red. It's the black. I want to see really nice defined black saddles, especially if there's a black line in the babies, because as they mature, I'm 100% confident that all my babies are going to be super nice reds. But if you have a nice red animal with black saddles or black lines, they pop like some of the animals that, have pictures of them on my pages or whatever, So that's what I really like. I like the definition and the
And so that you
contrast
can
of
see
the
from a
black.
baby.
Yes, the black. Yes,
Mhm.
sort of. I mean, sort of. Like the babies are just not that attractive. They're sort of drab. They might have a little bit of rusty reddish or orange to them, which I pay no attention to. A lot of the people will they come to a booth at a show or something. They're looking, oh, this one has more red than this one. I'm not sure. And the baby red and orange really has no bearing on the adult red. It's just a completely different color complex that's coming in as they go through that OCC. So
Mhm.
it's not, yeah, what the baby looks like is not going to define how it is as an adult as far as the red goes. But I do like seeing, I have a couple animals that I've held back that just popped from the get-go that really had a defined black lines in their saddles or it throughout their color pattern, and that's what really stands out to me. So, but I don't think I'm going to hold anything back from this year. There's a couple that look really nice, and this is just a hobby for me. I don't have infinite space. I don't have infinite time, so I think I've got the animals that I want to hold back from here on out. So,
And how
yeah,
much do you sell like a yearling for?
like 600 or so.
Okay, so it's pretty
Probably. I
reasonable.
mean, I shouldn't put a, I mean, I shouldn't put a price tag on it, but that's average.
Asterisks, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Give or take,
everything
we'll
supply
say.
and demand. I don't do this for a living. I don't need to get rich. But they are definitely a labor intensive baby. So yeah, if it's one of the ones that took a year to get going and it looks great and it's doing great now, then maybe ask a little bit more for it or whatever. But I'd say that's probably the average
And
on what
how big do
I
the
asked
adults
them.
get?
Pretty big. I have a male that's gonna be, let's see, he's gonna be 12 years old. He's probably 6 feet and not very robust. Definitely on the thinner side. I've seen pictures of some really large females. My biggest females are not this big, but um, like 7 to 8 feet. My biggest female is probably more like 6 feet too, and she's probably not quite double in girth, but certainly a lot heavier body than the male. So they're not small, but they're not huge either. And like the Sanzinia, they're very slow growth. Even when they're eating great, they don't like pack on the pounds quick, and they're definitely capable of getting fat because their growth rate won't keep. I mean, when they get going, they are great eaters for sure. And I've had some animals that it's like, okay, well, how feed you a little bit more, and they just fatten up. So you got to kind of just slow it down. They need to eat at a normal pace, and you don't want them getting fat. So
Yeah. And do you
I would
set
say
them up
five
with
to
height?
six years. I would
Yeah,
say
yeah,
five to
until
six
full.
years to get them to breeding size. Yeah.
Okay, yes, yeah. So it's another slow project, you
Yeah,
know.
and I would say like probably even longer than that to get to full size actually. But yeah, I wouldn't even try to breed them before 5 to 6 years old for the females.
And do you set them up with height as well?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
okay.
yeah.
So they're
Definitely.
pretty arboreal.
Yeah. I would say maybe 20, maybe 10 to 20% of the time they're out perched up on something. They do spend a lot of time in a hide or on the ground, just coiled up in a corner. Um, yeah, happiness for me, man, is like coming home and going in there and like I have them set up in similar enclosures to you have behind you there, and seeing them just up perched, and their colors are fired up and they're all bright red and they're just up perched, happy. So yeah, no, I definitely give them a lot of space, and yeah, they've done really well for me. I have nothing bad to say about the species at all, other than the fact that the babies are a freaking nightmare to get started. Sometimes, to
There's
put
always
it
got to
like,
be
not
one downside.
not a nightmare. And the babies are also born very small. So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, the Sanzinia, the babies are born big and they eat right away. The Dominicans, babies are born tiny and they're a major pain to get going, but they're both species that I really enjoy working with.
Yeah, and they're both very picture-esque. You see them and they're like very jaw-dropping, which I think is why
Yeah.
people probably get drawn to your page and they see you working with them. Another species that you have that you're working with that I honestly not seen before is now I'm forgetting the genus name, but I think it was a royal. I don't even remember the
Yeah, the
common
royal
name now.
snakes. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, it's just royal snakes. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. They never really had a common name. It's like a black-headed royal or red-headed royal. It's Spalarosophus atriceps. or Diadema atriceps, depending on which nomenclature you're following. But yeah, they're pretty awesome. In fact, I got a clutch of eggs here that I'm hoping hatches out any day now. They all look really good, and this is my first year producing those, and they
Are they
are a trip.
Asian? They're Asian, right?
No, they're like they're from Pakistan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think these animals came out of Pakistan originally.
Gotcha.
Pakistan shut down export like in 2002, I think, of reptiles. So they were one of the animals that was kind of almost lost during that ball python craze because at the time when they were coming in, people were like, well, they're, whatever. I don't know if I want another colubrid. They just kind of got lost. And luckily, a few people kept them and produced a few. Um, Adam Gee is who I got my female from. He has several that he's produced over the years. I got my female from him, and then the male was actually imported from Poland. So I have some diversity there in the two that I have. And they're great, man. They're the loudest hissers you've probably ever heard in your life. I mean, it's not deafening hiss, but they hiss so loud. They're very similar. They are somewhat of they stress a little bit easy, so I try not to poke and prod them too much, but similar to like a gopher snake or a bull snake of the Far East, similar in size. Their scales have that texture, that keeled feel to them like a gopher snake. And, gopher snakes are obviously very loud hissers too. So I feel like they're like sort of like I'm trying to remember what you would call that, like, an emerald tree boa versus a green tree python, right? They're very similar. They're taking the same niche in the ecosystem, but in totally different parts of the world. I feel like the atriceps and the Pituophis from North America are very similar to each other, but they're found in totally different parts of the world.
Yeah,
so like
yeah.
a gopher snake of the Far East. But they're amazing. My big female has this super black head and all these big black spots all over her. And
they're kind of like sand color, almost like the base color is like a tan kind of sandish.
Yeah, when they're babies, they look just like a diadem rat snake. If you've seen those before, they're fairly common. They're very cheap, and but as they grow, they lose the pattern, and their head becomes black or red or kind of like a reddish. Like that, my male has like more of a red head. It's blackish, but it's like red down the kind of the nape of the neck with black spots. And my female has a jet black head with black, black spots all over them. I would assume that their spots are probably about as unique as the fingerprint on a human. There's none of them are going to be the same. It really kind of comes out of nowhere. So really, really a cool species. Yeah, I'm stoked on them.
And is their hissing accompanied with lots of attempts at biting as well?
No, okay. No, they don't. I have not. They are rear fanged. Okay. There hasn't been a whole lot of documentation on the effects of the venom. I've not been bitten by one, and I've not had them even try. They hiss, and they hiss a lot, really really loudly, but no, they don't really bite. I've not had mine try to bite at all. So maybe it's just mine, but no, it's a lot of bark and no bite.
And have you had a clutch yet, or you're just working on a clutch?
This is my first clutch.
Okay.
That's about to hatch.
Hatched yet. Okay.
No, they've not hatched yet. And actually, the female ended up laying a second clutch, which I was not expecting. I did not put the male back in with her. I was just feeding her normally. And the next thing I know, I'm like, what the heck? She's all swelled up again. So put the nest box back in there, and sure as can be, I got another clutch. So I actually have two
fertile
clutches.
Eggs.
Yeah, and they're all fertile.
Wow.
So I have one clutch coat going right now, and the second clutch, that was probably just maybe 3 weeks ago that she laid that second clutch. So now I'm really not feeding her very much at all because I don't want her to lay anymore. I want her to take some time.
Recover.
And I had heard from Adam that, he hibernates them they go through a rumination just like his other colubrids, but I didn't think that she was really big enough to breed yet. I was going to give her another year. I was going to brumate her this year. So she was never cooled down at all. And she still produced the eggs. Once I saw her swelling up and going through the process, I said, well, what the heck? I better put this male in there. I don't want to get infertile eggs. If she's going to produce the eggs anyway, I might as well have a male in there. So I put this much younger male in there with her, and he got the job done. And she laid now 2 fertile clutches on just that one introduction between those two. So
wow. And so I guess time will tell how well the neonates eat.
Yeah. So when I got this female from Adam, she was a great eater right away. I think they're probably naturally rodent eaters in the wild, and I don't think I'll have any problem getting those started. I hope. Well, they got to hatch first, right? I mean, I'm not going to count my snakes before they hatch, but hopefully they'll hatch. And yeah, I'm excited to have that because it's another kind of left to center species that don't see a lot of, and that's right up my alley.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what drew me to it as well. I'm like, I'm not even familiar with this species when I saw the picture of it. So I think again, anything towards, because there's so many different, people have so many different preferences when it comes to keeping pets or keeping snakes as pets, that those different species will fulfill a niche that a random keeper might have. Right, you're not going to have thousands and thousands of people that want to keep that species, but you might have some people that would rather keep that than a ball python and not know about it. Are there other animals that you're working with right now that that you would define as left of center? We mentioned the indigos, which sort of falls into that category.
Yeah, a little bit. I have some tricolor hogs that I really enjoy. My other stuff is just, I have some Colombian rainbows, the blue-eyed leucistics, black and blue-eyed. Actually, sometimes you get a heterochromic one too. Those are really cool. I really like the Colombian rainbows because they sort of similar in size to a ball python. They have basic requirements. They're just a lot more active, a lot more fun, I would say. So if someone comes to me at a show, for example, and they're like, hey, well, I'm getting my first snake, or my son and daughter wants a snake, what's a good one to get or whatever, I really feel confident when I say, well, here's some Colombian rainbow boas to check out. Once they get past their little nippy baby stage, they really do make great pets. They don't get that big. They handle really well. They eat great. Really basic requirements. So I enjoy my Colombian rainbows for sure, and I'll probably always keep some of those just because someone comes to me and they want a heavier bodied snake, not a colubrid. They handle like an active ball python. They're heavy bodied in your hand. They're great for a first time keeper to get, or even someone that just wants a good pet snake. They're active, confident, and so I do enjoy my Colombian rainbows. I have some Dumerals boas as well, which I really like. Another great species for someone that wants something a little more interesting than a ball python or a corn snake, but doesn't want to, something that's going to get so big it eats them out of the house, or something that's real feisty. Dumerals boas make great pets for sure. Oh my God, that's the one thing with those. You got to okay, they have a really crazy feeding response. Okay, this thing will literally jump off the ground to eat what it's going to eat. But if it's not feeding time, they're great.
Yeah,
they're great. Dumerals boas, I've always liked them. So, and they kind of go with the Madagascar theme. The Madagascar. Got the Madagascar tree boas, and I got the
ground boa,
the Dumerals too. So, other than that, I have some other colubrid stuff. Just a lot of run of the mill stuff. Some Cow Kings, which always have held a place for me because when I was 5 years old, my first time hiking out or whatever, I was collecting Cow Kings at the time just to try to keep in my backyard as a pet or whatever. I'd put it in a bucket for a week or something until my mom would make me let it go. So Cow Kings are just kind of a special animal for me. And then I've got some Sinaloans and some Trans-Pecos rat snakes. I do have a good group of Trans-Pecos rat snakes, which I really enjoy. You don't see a lot of those really around. They seem to sell pretty well because not a lot of people are working with them. I've got the Xanthix blondes, which are kind of like that almost blue purple look to them, and blondes, and then some other locality, just normal phase Trans-Pecos, and those are cool. They're a cool colubrid for sure. A little bit different than corn snake or whatever, but similar, very basic care. Got big buggy eyes that cute little faces. So
I
enjoy my
rat snakes.
Trans-Pecos. Yeah, I enjoy my Trans-Pecos for sure.
How many animals do you have, do you think, roughly?
Including babies or just breeders?
Let's just say adults, yeah.
Just adults, I'd say probably 40.
Okay. So fair size. Yeah. Especially for one
size.
person. Do you have help? I know you have sons. I'm not sure if that snake gene got transferred.
Dude, I can't even get my sons to pick up their socks off the couch. You did no. No, it's a one-man show around here for the most part. My kids will help a little bit. They'll help me with shows. My wife will help me with shows and stuff like that. But for the most part, yeah, I spend my 2 days off um, cleaning snakes, feeding. I produce all my own rodents too. So
Oh, you do? Okay.
got, oh yeah, yeah. And then, well, at least I don't produce my own quail, but I do produce my own rats and mice. So yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a
So
lot of work,
what
man.
keeps you doing it? Like, is the passion for the animals, or because there's always we can romanticize keeping 40 snakes, all these different beautiful species. It looks incredible, and then when you realize that Monday and Tuesday that you lose every week of basically cleaning up snake poop and having to do work that's not necessarily exciting, but you're
Yeah.
still involved. And like, do you ever feel like you're getting close to burning out, or is the passion is too strong for that?
No, I mean, I don't feel like I'm burning out at all. I definitely hear what you're saying, where it's just like a lot of work, and every time we want to go on a vacation or something, it's like, oh well, we got to get, it's you definitely sacrifice that, that feeling that, well, I can just go on vacation and someone can watch the dogs and that'll be that, no, it's like there's more that's got to happen here for that. But I don't know, I enjoy working. I enjoy the process. If you don't enjoy the process, if you didn't enjoy cleaning glass and scrubbing snake poop out of a water bowl and all the different things that go along with it, then this is probably not the hobby for you. I enjoy the process myself. I enjoy working with the animals. Like I said, happiness for me is coming in and seeing some of my animals out cruising around, or like I said, the Dominicans or the Sanzinia when they're all perched up nice, and I enjoy having that piece of natural artwork on the wall, I guess you could call
Hmm.
it. I mean, I enjoy being connected to nature, and I enjoy even when I do have time, I enjoy herping still. I spend a lot of time hiking around Southern California out in the desert or whatever, and I don't take anything out of the wild. I just take pictures and I
Flipboards.
just enjoy flipboards or cruise roads or look under rocks and cracks and whatever, depending on the species we're after in that
Have you
area.
ever
But
taken a bite from anything venomous in the wild? I see videos of you flipping boards, and like you'll flip a board and there's like 10 little rattlesnakes down there, and I just think, like,
yeah,
as you pry your fingers underneath there, like, has there ever been a close call?
not really.
Wow.
No, no. I guess I've been lucky or just been careful, and yeah, especially around here because it's all Southern Pacifics. In my specific area, you can go just not that far away and get red diamonds and stuff. But yeah, the Southern Pacific rattlesnakes, man, they're ready to bite all, all the time. They don't have the best attitudes most of the time. But no, I've never had a hit from a venomous animal. Knock on wood somewhere. But
Yeah.
no, I enjoy seeing them in the wild. And yeah, I've got all these board lines I've put around just within a couple miles of my house. No one even knows where they are. But there's pretty much any given day I can go out there and find something, you
Yeah,
know,
that's cool.
which is cool. And then there's a lot of other stuff just within where I'm at geographically. I mean, I can be within a couple hours. I can be out in the Death Valley desert, and out into the Mojave. And I could be down in Mexico. I could be in the mountains. And then just slightly inland from me is Ortega Highway, which goes right over the Santa Ana Mountains. And there's all sorts of speckled rattlesnakes and potential for all sorts of different species within a pretty short striking distance from where I'm at. So yeah, I enjoy being in nature and walking around through the desert. One of my
Yeah.
favorite pastimes for sure.
As a
Regardless of what
reptile
we found out,
person.
I was just out in the desert with my son last week for his birthday, and we were just excited as can be, finding tarantulas and scorpions and sidewinders. I mean, it's all good.
Yeah. As an animal person, it's pretty hard to beat that location anyway. There's just
Hmm.
so much to go for.
Yeah, no, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for the opportunities to still enjoy some wild nature before it's all gone. Unfortunately, there's a lot of development around here,
Oh
but
yeah.
thankfully there's some good parks that Cleveland National Park is not that far from me, which is a huge area of preserve. Do a lot of hiking through there. So yeah, yeah, man, I love it.
But I think you made a good point about loving the process. And I think that's one thing for people who are getting into keeping, because it's so exciting to get your first animal. And even when you do get your first animal, just interacting with it is so exciting. And it's usually a pretty quick trip to start looking for new animals, because because that excitement is so powerful buying something new. And I think it's a good question for keepers to ask themselves, like, are they enjoying the daily maintenance? If you have one snake, are you procrastinating changing the water and cleaning because you just don't enjoy that very much? If so, you probably want to hold off on getting more, because you do have to actually love the process of, like, the boring stuff that is not the romantic stuff about keeping reptiles, is the stuff that you actually have to like in order to keep on the scale that even I keep with 6 animals. You still have to dedicate some time every week, but especially when it's someone like yourself that has, 40, 50 animals.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a little bit like, well, I enjoy the process so much that it's sort of like a stress relief, I guess.
Yes.
I have, full-time job, a wife, 4 sons, and, a lot of my day to day is stressful. Just my day to day, everything is stressful. And if I can go into my snake room and just breathe a sigh of calm, and I can work with my animals at my pace, and I can, go through the process. It's sort of like mindless work in a way, but not totally mindless, but I don't know.
It's meditative.
It's meditative. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And going in and cleaning that enclosure and making it look really great, and seeing a nice looking animal, and, seeing these animals being born or eggs hatching. It's all stress relief for me. So yeah, as far as the time, it is a huge time commitment. Sometimes there's financial gain to come out of it. Sometimes there's financial loss that come out of it, of course, but it certainly pays for itself plus a little bit. So that helps also. But I mean, there's a lot of guys that would, go spend 10 hours, playing a round of golf, and that's what they probably get, that same stress relief from doing that, as I would get with spending 10 hours working on my animals.
Yeah.
Golfing just costs a lot more money, and I'm actually, making a few dollars from time to time. So, or watching football, I mean, there's guys that'll sit down the whole Sunday and watch football games. That's not really my thing. I'd rather work with my animals. So that's where I'm happiest most of the time.
Yeah, and I would say golf falls into the opposite of a meditative experience for me.
I've actually never played a round of golf in my life.
I've done it 2 times, and I hated it all. I'm sorry to all the golf players out there, but it's too long. You don't do a sport for 5 hours; it's too much. But but you totally get what you're saying. It's just that process of going through things, and it's totally meditative and relaxing, and kind of you're taking a room that's you walk in, it's in disorder, and then you're reorganizing it and putting it in order. And I think that's helpful for your brain. Yeah.
For a simple-minded person like me, if I can go in and like know that I have this, I need to start here, and I'm going to end there, and I'm going to make all these things look good. That's like you said, meditative and therapeutic, you could say. For me, absolutely. I feel like I've accomplished something, and I didn't stress myself out in the process, and I got to work with my animals. So
exactly,
so that's what it's about for me. I think no matter what happens in life, even if I won the lottery, you know what I mean? If I won the lottery, I would still be keeping my animals. I would just, open a zoo or something. I'm definitely not keeping them for the financial aspect of it or anything like that. I would keep them regardless of where I was at in life. It's just something I've always enjoyed, and I certainly always will.
Are there other species that you kind of have an eye on, something that you might bring into your left of center kind of theme?
If I had more space, there are some. I really like spectacled racers, the speckled racers rather. But they really need a ton of space. I think even more so than the indigos, or at least comparable. So I don't want to get any of those right now. I think they're gorgeous, and I remember looking at pictures of them as a kid, and that, I don't know if you ever had that Atlas of Reptiles and Amphibians, that big red giant book that's about this thick. Anyway, it was one of the first reptile books that first serious reptile book I ever got, and I was maybe 8 years old. My dad bought it for me. Anyway, I remember seeing pictures of them as a kid, I was like, wow, that is the most beautiful snake I've ever seen in my life. And this, at times they'll come available. They're usually wild caught animals. So that's a species I've looked into, but I just don't have the space to where I could feel like I could really give that animal what it needs. Other than that, I mean, not really. I've been lucky in the way that I've started out small, and I've kind of been able to say, okay, well, I made a little money off my king snakes or just whatever I started out with, and then okay, maybe I can purchase one of these Sanzinia, and then maybe I can get a pair, and then I had some babies and whatever. So I've built my collection over time, and I've been lucky to kind of get what I really want. I've been lucky and fortunate enough to I have what I want. I have some indigos. I got my Dominicans. I got my Sanzinia. I mean, they're big. When I saw the Atriceps, I'm like, that is cool. I got to have that, and I was able to get it, and then ended up with a pair of those, and they've now produced some clutches for me. So if something else comes around that really catches my eye, and I've got time and space for, then you'll see it.
Yeah, it'll pop up.
I'll do what I need to do to get it. But yeah, I mean, those Bolin's pythons are pretty amazing. I do see those, and they're pretty awesome. My buddy John has a couple, but it's a lot of cash, man. Too much money to put out
once
there.
Once you're getting into the price of a car or something.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I got too many kids to be spending that much money on an animal right now.
Yeah.
But maybe someday. No, they are pretty impressive.
Definitely. Well, Chad, this was a fantastic conversation. I think it's so important to highlight some of these. I think I like you're saying of left of center species, and to show people that there's so much more out there. And I think the ones that you're working with are great examples. And I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to talk about those today. Can you let the listeners know where they can find you online, and if they want to go see pictures of what we're talking about today?
Yeah. I do have a Facebook. I don't really do much on Facebook, just Golden Coast Exotics. And then I think Instagram is probably where I'm most. You can reach out to me on there, send me a message on there. I try to reply to everybody in a timely fashion. Just Golden Coast Exotics. That's it. You can email me if you have a question about something, goldencoastexotics@gmail.com. Yeah, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of, and I answer everything I can as timely as possible.
And are you fairly regular vendor at expos in your area, or is it just a once a year type thing?
Yeah. I usually do 2 shows in Arizona. It's the Mesa, the Greater Phoenix Reptile Expo there, which is a really good show if you're in Arizona. I usually do the Reptile Super Shows here in California as well, either in Anaheim or Pomona or both. Central Valley Reptile Expos as well. I'll do some of those. It really kind of depends on the timing. Like I said, I got a lot of irons in the fire with work and everything else. So it's getting the weekend time off, and then also not having a wrestling tournament or something going on that week. But I vend as much as possible, certainly in Southern California. And like I said, I do those 2 shows religiously every year in Arizona, the 2 Phoenix Mesa Reptile Expos.
Awesome. So
every year
people can go.
But we ship all over too. I mean, I ship all over, easy peasy.
Yeah. It's as we started the conversation with, it's a lot easier to ship reptiles these days, so people can check out your page, and if they happen to be at a show you're at, they can drop by and say hi.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Awesome. Well, Chad, thank you so much for being here. This was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that is the end of the episode. Chad, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. I really enjoyed listening to your story and hearing about the species that you're working with. And listeners, I do hope that maybe you're not interested in the specific species we talked about today, but hopefully that kind of piqued your interest to look outside of the norm and maybe not be afraid to try to look at some other species that maybe aren't as common. So next time you're walking through an expo or at your local reptile shop, if you see something that you haven't seen before, hopefully this podcast gives you the motivation to at least go home and look into that species a little bit more and see if it's something that you might want to work on or work with. I think it's a great idea for us to continue to work on expanding the diversity, or maybe returning back to the diversity that we used to have within the hobby, just to give us a little bit more variety. And there's nothing more, I think, sad than walking through an expo and seeing the same species table after table. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to the show. I hope you enjoyed it. Please consider rating us on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can comment on Spotify as well. If you're looking for more information on the podcast, make sure you head to animalsathomenetwork.com or head to www.patreon.com/animalsathome to support the podcast there. Also, big shout out to Magic Mind for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Thank you so much. As a reminder, you can head to magicmind.com/animalsathome to receive up to 48% off your first subscription purchase for the next 10 days by using the code animalsathome20. Thank you again, everybody. I will catch you in the next episode.